opens its archives.
Pretty loose for a Friday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, A Second Look, wherever you get your podcasts. CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. Yeah.
Always been political from the very beginning, and I'm glad to see that this case is finally going away. It never should have been brought in the first place.
We continue to work to try and get an agreement over the line, and we're hopeful we can get one, but we need both of the parties to get to yes.
It's frankly an insult and really troubling that Mr. Trump would nominate someone who has admitted that he's paid off a victim who has claimed rape allegations against him. This is not the kind of person you want to lead the Department of Defense.
Hello, I'm Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. We start tonight with a major legal victory for President-elect Donald Trump. Special counsel Jack Smith had hoped to prove in court that the then outgoing president had tried to subvert the 2020 presidential election and incited a riot at the U.S. Capitol. Almost 4 years later, the Court of Public Opinion handed Trump back the keys to the White House, and today, faced with the Justice Department's policy shielding presidents from prosecution, Smith filed a motion to dismiss the election interference and classified documents cases. Late today, Judge Tanya Chutkan granted the dismissal of the January 6th case. We're waiting to hear about the classified documents one down in Florida. Joining us now, we will start off with Scott McFarland here in Washington and Katrina Kaufman in West Palm Beach. Scott, good to see you. What led to this decision to dismiss, and what does it mean going forward for the legal issues facing the president-elect?
To be clear, this was no surprise. This was expected, but for a case that made history, this broad federal prosecution of a former U.S. president for election conspiracy, it sure does end with a whimper. Just a little 6-page filing from Jack Smith ending this chapter of American history. What he says, though, in that very brief filing is that this is not a statement about the strength of the case, that the case wasn't weakened, that the case didn't have flaws, but that you simply cannot prosecute a sitting president, that the Constitution precludes that the Department of Justice will not allow that. So this case, he says, must be dismissed, not paused, but dismissed, because he's making the argument that having this over the president's head for a few years until he leaves office is also an undue burden. So the judge, in very short order, agreed to dismiss it without prejudice, which legal analysts tell us means Trump may still seek to pardon himself to avoid any future exposure after his presidency.
Interesting. Katrina, you were there monitoring the Trump transition from the CBS News offices in West Palm Beach. We know that the judge, Tanya Chutkan, here in Washington, at least, has agreed to order the dismissal of the January 6th case. Big win for the Trump team. He said it himself in a statement, a major victory for the rule of law. What else, if anything, are we hearing from the president-elect and his team?
So, as you mentioned, Trump posted on both Truth Social and X just extolling this development. He said that these cases, like all of the cases that have been brought against him, were empty and lawless. He says that over $100 million have been wasted in the pursuit of him. And then he goes on to name the various prosecutors against him. Fonnie Willis, and he mentions Nathan Wade, who she was accused of having a romantic relationship with, which really held up the case in Georgia. He says that $1 million was wasted there, and they used it to take trips around the world. He mentioned Letitia James, who brought the civil fraud case against him. And then, of course, Alvin Bragg, who brought the New York criminal case against him. But Trump said that he was forced to do that by the Justice Department, and that despite all of this, he has persevered and he has won.
We are waiting for a decision in the Florida-based classified documents case. We have not heard from the judge there yet. Eileen Cannon.
So what's happened here is Jack Smith has motioned to dismiss his own appeal because, of course, that Florida classified records case against Trump was dismissed by one of his appointed judges, Eileen Cannon, 2 days after the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania. She made the argument in her ruling that the Supreme Court's recent language indicated the special counsel may not have been lawfully appointed or funded. Jack Smith was appealing that, trying to resuscitate the case, and now he's going to stand down, making the same argument that can't prosecute a sitting president, so no need to resuscitate all of this appeal. But there is some sense that the special counsel may still want to litigate this issue about whether special counsels are lawfully appointed and lawfully funded. That may play out independent of Trump's exposure.
Because that was a legal theory advanced by Justice Clarence Thomas, among others, that there should be questions raised about the legality of them.
That's right.
What does this mean for those that have either been charged, found guilty, prosecuted to the fullest extent regarding January 6th, and those still awaiting trial?
There are 1,500 people who have been charged with their roles in January 6th. About 2/3 of them have pleaded guilty. A couple hundred more have been convicted at trial, which leaves a few hundred more still to be prosecuted fully. And there still are arrests. Ed, there were 2 arrests announced today for January 6, 2021. Trump has pledged pardons. Many of these defendants who have their cases open are seeking to delay them until after January 20th, hoping to get the pardon. For now, judges are saying, no, you continue with your cases. You can't speculate a pardon's coming and slow down your case. But, boy, they sure are expecting pardons when Trump takes office.
Yeah, Katrina, let's shift now to the transition. As you know, the president-elect added several more names over the weekend to his incoming administration. We have their names and faces we can show folks. There's guys like Scott Bessent, set to be his pick for Treasury Secretary, the outgoing Oregon Congresswoman Lori Chavez de Remer, who's going to be the labor pick, Brooke Rollins, one of his close policy aides for agriculture, Scott Turner, former NFL player and motivational speaker for Department of Housing and Urban Development. Is there anything that sort of speaks to who these people are, why he chose them, and are we expecting other picks to come in the coming hours or days?
We are still waiting for a few more smaller picks. You know, one that's really notable that you just mentioned is Scott Bessent. That position of Secretary of the Treasury is very coveted, and there was really a lot of infighting over it, we heard. Bessent was an early favorite. Then it was potentially supposed to be Howard Lutnick, who ultimately got Secretary of Commerce. Then some other names came into the mix. But there's been a really positive response to the selection of Scott Bessent, who is a hedge fund manager. The markets really responded positively to that. Another notable pick is Alex Wong, who's the principal deputy national security advisor. And what's interesting about him is he is the person who facilitated Trump's meeting with Kim Jong-un during his first administration. So that relationship with North Korea, he also has ties to China. You mentioned Brooke Rollins. She has a background in agriculture, actually grew up on a farm, studied agricultural development. Trump has extolled her work with 4-H.
And Katrina, do we have any better sense of whether the Trump transition team will ever use traditional FBI background checks, or are they still relying on private entities to look into the past of these picks?
You know, it's not quite clear how they're going to move forward with that yet, Ed, but really this is just standard practice. So as of now, they are breaking with tradition, it seems, in going this route, but it's not clear that would ultimately hold up confirmation of these candidates.
Yeah, an important distinction that there's no law that requires an FBI background check. It's just been tradition because the FBI was seen as a reliable entity that could look into these things. Of course, the president-elect has a history with the FBI that doesn't necessarily sow trust. Let's put it that way. Katrina Coffin at West Palm Beach, Scott McFarland here in Washington. Thank you both for the latest on all that. Coming up, we'll take a deeper look at what led Jack Smith to call for the dismissal of the federal cases against President-elect Donald Trump. Former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Harry Litman, a friend of the program, joins us next. Plus, an Israeli strike smashes into a Beirut building, the massive explosion sending smoke billowing into the sky. But could a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon be just hours away? We're tracking that as well. You're watching America Decides.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy!
It's gonna be a ride.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
fast do you think you were going?
195 mile an hour. This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close. Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We're continuing to follow today's significant legal victories for President-elect Donald Trump. The federal election interference case against him has been dismissed. Special counsel Jack Smith has also filed a request to end the classified documents case against him that's based down in Florida. We are joined now by Harry Litman. He is, of course, a former U.S. attorney, a former deputy assistant attorney general, and the host of the Talking Feds podcast, who has been a frequent voice of expertise for us throughout the trials and tribulations of Mr. Trump. Harry, at this point, is there simply no way forward for these cases now that the president-elect is returning to the White House?
And that is the short answer. There is a couple months left, and some people were arguing that maybe Jack Smith could make some maneuvers, but really the writing is more than on the wall. It's, you know, everything but sealed and delivered. Come January 20th, he could simply order the department to stand down. What Smith has done today is a little bit different, and we'll see how he reacts. As he said, dismiss these, but without prejudice. That means, you know, they're on life support, but a weak heartbeat continues. They could still potentially be revived come 2029. Lots can happen between now and then, but it's not the definitive dismissal that Trump would effectuate were he to come in with the cases still around.
And we should point out, once he's president, he could, in essence, wipe the slate clean himself, at least among the federal cases, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a little bit unclear how he then revives them, gives them back to a court, and then says, please dismiss them with prejudice. That's something that a court could refuse. Many people have speculated he could pardon himself, but that's pretty tenuous in constitutional grounds. So I'm sure he will fight hard to make these cases not simply go away for 4 years, but go away forever. And I think it's a little bit unclear that right now that he can achieve it. So in that sense, having been routed generally by the happenstance of the election, Smith had one little card left to play, and he has played it.
So we were just showing people, and we should show them again, the various cases facing the president-elect. The federal and the various state-level cases. As you can see, they're convicted in New York. The Georgia case is delayed. The elections, January 6th case now dismissed. We're waiting on a dismissal ruling in the Florida classified documents case. There's the civil case involving Eugene Carroll. When it comes to the New York so-called hush money case and the Georgia election fraud case, do the judges in those situations take cues from what the feds have now decided? Is there a chance he never gets sentenced, for example, in the New York case?
I think there is. First, in Georgia, the Court of Appeal there, that's where that case is on the motion to recuse. Bonnie Willis has already taken its appeal off calendar and said, we're not even going to tell you if we're going to bring it back. In New York, yes, the judges said Trump has a big motion to dismiss based on immunity, saying make the whole thing go away as if it never happened. And if he wins that motion, which the judge has agreed to hear first, then the sentencing goes away. If he loses it, he'll appeal that loss, maybe all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But if and when a ruling of that nature is upheld, there's still the possibility of a sentence by Judge Juan Merchan in the New York case where he's been convicted of 34 counts. He'll have an argument then that says something like just even showing up and being subject to punishment in this way violates the Constitution. No court has ever held it, but he could try to push a little on the immunity opinion from last year to have a court recognize it.
In our remaining minute or so, Harry, I'm curious. You've worked in the Justice Department. You host a podcast called Talking Feds, for goodness sake. Yeah. What's it like for the career attorneys at the Justice Department who see these cases falling apart? Are they demoralized by this, or are they kind of like, well, Dem's the rules, we just got to do what the rules say?
No, this is not a Dem's the rules as usual kind of situation. It's not simply these cases falling apart, but the assertion of the power just from the president to make them fall apart and other things that are contemplated for the DOJ. We have a really demoralized career staff, people putting their resumes on the street, people being really afraid of what Trump's entry will mean for the storied DOJ function of doing justice without fear or favor. This is the worst crisis I've ever seen in DOJ history.
And that is exactly how the president-elect wants it to some extent. I mean, he's right. Trying to disrupt the federal government. Might as well start with the Justice Department. Harry Litman, we appreciate your perspective always. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ed.
Shifting now to the Middle East, another day of Israeli strikes across Lebanon. This massive explosion reducing a Beirut building to rubble. We are months into this latest round of the Israel-Hezbollah conflict, and a possible ceasefire deal could be right around the corner. But how many times have we heard that before? CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie Daggett joins us now from the Pentagon. So, Charlie, both Israeli and American officials today saying a deal between Hezbollah and Israel for a ceasefire could be close. What's the latest? What do we know?
Well, you saw those strikes. You just showed those strikes. But despite that, it's safe to say that they're closer really than at any time since this conflict began. Some sources are suggesting there could be a deal struck in the next 24 hours, at least by Thanksgiving. But to quote U.S. National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, nothing is done until everything is done. So the deal is thought to include a 60-day temporary ceasefire leading to a permanent ceasefire. There are a couple of sticking points. The Israelis want to push Hezbollah 30 miles north away from the border with Israel across the Litani River, and reserve the right to push them back militarily if they start creeping back in and reforming. So it's said to include an international monitoring component that includes the United States, but it would rely heavily on Lebanon's own military and that UN force, UNIFIL, inside that buffer zone.
So why would Israel be intensifying attacks on the verge of a ceasefire deal? Are they trying to just finish up some things, or is this sort of one last attempt to push them back?
Yeah, Ed, it's a military tactic the Israelis have turned to in the past. They to just keep punching, and in this case, punch harder, essentially till the bell rings. So, they're seeking leverage, trying to take out high-value Hezbollah command and control. An Israeli official I spoke to here said that would be the aim. I was there in Lebanon, in Israel, when the same thing happened back in 2006. That was the last major fight. They were literally launching missiles from both sides right up until the second that the ceasefire took hold. But it's bad. You know, Lebanese officials say dozens were killed in this latest round of airstrikes, and it's two-way traffic. Israel is saying that Hezbollah launched at least 250 rockets toward Israel in this latest wave. So more than 3,000 people have been killed, not Gaza, just in this Lebanese or this fight against Hezbollah, Lebanon. And this is some of the heaviest attacks since it all began.
Right. And speaking of Gaza, there is a new United Nations report describing the conditions in northern Gaza as catastrophic. Is there any movement that we're aware of getting more aid into that region?
Ed, the answer to that is yes and no. We put a question to officials every day here at the Pentagon, because you might remember, right, Defense Secretary Austin and Secretary of State Blinken sent that letter essentially putting Israel on a 30-day notice to do more or risk U.S. military support in the future. But as you said, our colleagues inside Gaza said it's particularly grim in the north. The UN says they've been unable to deliver food because they're being cut off, obstructed by Israeli forces. The Red Cross or Red Crescent says hospitals are running out of supplies. Some of the crossings, it's been pointed out, like Erez crossing between Israel, they have been opened. But the UN says looting has now become a major issue. Elizabeth Palmer reported that over the weekend. Convoys were obstructed. They had to take an unfamiliar route, and that's when the looters struck. So it's not just food. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced. Winter is here, bringing low temperatures, rainstorms, and that doesn't just add to the misery, but the spread of disease. So aid agencies say Israelis have to do more to protect that aid and protect those convoys until they get to where they're needed most.
Well, we'll continue to monitor that because that obviously is a big part of this story that we haven't forgotten. Charlie Daggett over at the Pentagon for us tonight. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Ed.
In less than 2 months, President Biden's half-century-long political career is set to come to an end. Up next, what his legacy will look like and what effect Trump's re-election has on it. We are streaming America Decides.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 Hours, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The
grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Negative views towards the economy helped drive voters to the polls this election. And now, according to new CBS News polling, more Americans are already feeling better about the economy. 42% of registered voters say the economy is, quote, good. That's a 6% jump from October. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now. Anthony, as the votes are still being tallied in various parts of the country, it's interesting that you have all this new data about how people are already feeling 3 weeks after the fact. So take us through how voters feel about the Trump transition so far.
Positively, in a word, Ed. Let me show you what that looks like, right? How's he handling the transition? 59% approve. Now, what happens here is you're looking at all Americans here, whether people voted or not. In fact, let me show you that breakdown and how people feel about the results of the election, right? For people who voted, especially those who voted for Donald Trump, happy or satisfied. But even those who didn't vote say that they're happy or satisfied on balance. And that kind of tells you, well, they maybe let other people decide, or maybe they didn't really love either candidate, but they're happy and satisfied. That's what drives those overall Americans numbers. And take a look at these splits, though. When we get back to partisanship, Ed, you get Republicans who are excited and optimistic, even more so than they were in 2016, the first time he got elected. Democrats concerned and scared, but not necessarily motivated to oppose him or do things to oppose him. They're more sort of less paying attention, a little bit maybe exhausted from the election campaign.
They're sitting a few plays out. That 4% concerned, 1% scared Republicans, that would be an interesting group of people to meet. and in your last group of numbers, are the 13% who are angry but didn't vote. That's the poll up or shut up group of people, right? Like if you didn't vote, you're not allowed to have an opinion, many people would say. Interesting that 13% of non-voters are angry about it, but didn't show up.
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's really important to look at people who didn't vote, because when we talk so much about the shifts that you saw in a lot of these states and a lot of even traditionally blue areas, some of that shift was people shifting votes, but some of it, especially were Democrats not showing up, which made the shift all the more pronounced.
So now, what do they make of his cabinet selection so far?
Okay, so net positive is the short answer to that, Ed. And I'm going to scroll over here because what you're going to see is some of the particular picks. For example, Marco Rubio, right, at Secretary of State, net positive as a good choice. And there's a third who still haven't heard enough to really weigh in on it. But again, net positive, but even perhaps more importantly for Donald Trump's voters, what were they expecting? They're overwhelmingly positive on this. Another one, let's say RFK, we tested this for HHS, right? Again, net positive for people who have a view, very positive for Trump voters. I will say this, you hear some pundits talk about whether these are unconventional picks or surprising picks, but at the same time, remember, Donald Trump did very well, continues to do well in the polling, among people who say that the overall political system is completely broken, needs to be completely changed. And maybe this is part and parcel of that.
And that's part of why these legal victories today are so significant, because as Harry Littman told us earlier, if career prosecutors are deflated by all this, well, that's exactly what Trump was campaigning to do. And he's accomplished a political victory, perhaps, while also taking a legal one today. Anthony Salvanto with the numbers. Thank you as always, sir.
Thank you.
So when President Biden took office almost 4 years ago, it appeared he had ended the Trump era in Republican politics. So how will handing the keys back to his predecessor affect his legacy? There's something that our Hunter Woodall has been looking at, and I'm so glad that you did. You wrote on CBSNews.com today that this is the season of second-guessing on the left, a time of what-ifs and maybes. What did you find in your conversations with Democrats about how they think the president's going to be remembered now that he's going to be bookended by Trump?
Well, it was so notable. Congressman Lloyd Doggett from Texas, he was the first congressional Democrat to call on President Biden to withdraw from the race in July after that disastrous June debate performance. And his big statement to me was he wishes he called on Biden to drop out, the race sooner, but also that he, the big part of Biden's legacy, the biggest success he could have had would have been had he made this call a year ago, to drop out of the race, give Democrats a chance to really search for a nominee that could have beaten Trump. And I think for most of these Democrats, what we're seeing right now is exactly what they were worried about: a Trump presidency, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate, and this idea that they're going to, see a lot of Republican, legislative victories potentially in the months and years to come.
But when you talk to these Democrats, what do they see as the biggest sort of substantive or policy wins of the Biden years?
Well, it's notable. I mean, it's really those first 2 years. There was the bipartisan infrastructure law. Yep. There was the bipartisan gun safety legislation. There was the Chips and Sciences Act, semiconductor chips. And there's also, obviously, the Inflation Reduction Act, which wasn't so focused on inflation, but a major climate law, to combat climate change. Those are the wins, but we keep wondering, and this came up with Democrats I spoke to, how much these wins get rolled back by this Republican trifecta in Washington. So Biden's legacy for the moment is sandwiched in between these two Trump victories, but it also remains a little bit to be written what exactly Republicans are going to do to impact these last few years.
And there were about 30 House Democrats who had called for the president to drop out after that infamous July debate. What does their political future look like? What is their fate in a Republican-controlled Washington?
Well, and that was what was fascinating, going through the list and talking to members on that list. You had Sherrod Brown of Ohio, John Tester of Montana. They called on Biden to withdraw. They both lost their Senate seats, crucial to Republicans, taking control of the Senate. But a lot of these Democrats in the House who called on President Biden to withdraw from the race, they were much more, they're likely to be here and whether, whatever happens during this next Trump term. And it's interesting because, they represent parts of the country, California, Texas, Minnesota. And you get the sense that, they're ready to try and maybe be bipartisan, but they're also worried about what's going to happen next. And, Republicans are really gloating about that they were able to turn Biden away after he ran so much on defeating Trump, beating Trumpism, and here we are.
That poll that Anthony was just sharing with us has that incredible stat there that a big chunk of Democrats right now are just deflated, defeated, want nothing to do with it. We know they've turned off the TV. They're not engaging. Is there any concern among the elected Democrats you talk to about how you somehow revive the coalition and get people excited again?
Well, and that's the part that I think we're still trying to figure out because, back in 2016, you felt like there was so much immediate backlash to Trump from Democrats. And you're just not seeing that now. And, us political nerds know, 2028 starts the day after the election. And I'm still not quite sure, what exactly, what is Democrats' path forward? They don't really have a leader party-wise right now. And it's really not clear what happens and who really commands the message moving forward.
Well, I'm glad you looked into it. And if you're interested, folks, you can read it at cbsnews.com. Hunter Woodall, thanks for being here. We wanted to note that Ethel Kennedy was laid to rest today next to her husband at Arlington National Cemetery. Ethel never remarried after her husband, Robert F. Kennedy, was assassinated in 1968. The gravesite is a frequent, popular stop for the public who pay respects there at Arlington National Cemetery, just down the hill from where JFK is buried. These images of the burial were posted online by her daughter, Carrie Kennedy. Ethel Kennedy was 96 years old. We'll have more America Decides coming up. Stay with us.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
Can see clearly now.
Clearly, CBS Mornings.
Weekdays on CBS.
Yeah!
Tony, coming?
No, I'm going to stick around for an hour.
Hey!
CBS Mornings Plus with Adriana Diaz and Tony DeCopel, right after CBS Mornings.
It's just like mornings.
Plus fun.
Oh, yeah, it's gonna be a bright, sunshiny day.
These 7 miles of tunnels were the secret storage site for fuel for the Navy's Pacific Fleet in planes.
So this is one of the tanks.
Oh my gosh.
What happened 20 stories below ground is a story for 60 Minutes.
This thing that was a lifeline for the fleet is a threat.
That's right.
I'm Erin Moriarty of 48 Hours, and of all the cases I've covered, this is the one that troubles me most. Listen to Murder in the Orange Grove, the troubled case against Crosley Green, wherever you get your podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Sunday morning, a visit with the Wayans at Papa's house, plus affairs of state with the diplomat, and in praise of pigeons. Listen for the trumpet.
Welcome back to America Decides. It didn't take President-elect Trump long to pick his second choice for Attorney General once Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from consideration last week. He's asking former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to be his nominee. She defended then-President Trump during his first impeachment trial and has spent much of the last year running a Trump-aligned policy institute. We're joined now by Jasmine Wright and Shelby Talcott. Jasmine covers politics for Notice, N-O-T-U-S, News of the United States. And Shelby covers the same beat for Semaphore. If you like your news yellow, you should go check out Semaphore. You'll understand what you do. But good to see both of you. Thank you for being here. Happy Monday. One of those days where you kind of go, there was a lot more yet again. Let's start where last week kind of ended, Shelby, on Pam Bondi, because it's an important and a notable pick, obviously going to be a very high-profile position. Remind us where she sort of fits into the Trump orbit, why he'd want her around, and what we can anticipate she might do to run the Justice Department.
Yeah, she's been in Donald Trump's orbit really since the start. She was a top Florida surrogate in 2016. She was involved in defending him during his first impeachment trial. She was defending him after the 2020 election. She even went on TV and said that that they should prosecute the bad prosecutors who indicted Donald Trump. So that is something to watch as she heads into this position. But what was notable was I think a lot of people thought after Matt Gaetz decided to step aside that Donald Trump was going to begin his search anew. And in fact, he had an interview lined up with Pam Bondi at Mar-a-Lago that same day and announced it just hours later. So he clearly had her in mind as a second choice. She is seen as a longtime loyalist. And as we know, that is something that he is really focused on as he's picking these various people.
She's been around so long. Her political career actually traces back to a Sarah Palin endorsement. Like, you got to go back to the classics of the MAGA movement, the early origins, like the OG. The BT before Trump almost, because she's been around that long. And it was Palin that really helped elevate her, and then she latched on to Trump. Based on your reporting, how psyched are they about today's legal rulings?
Oh, they're extremely excited. I think that internally they were expecting it. It was just sort of a wait and see when this is going to happen as soon as he was elected. Even before he was elected, you know, we all spoke to people who said none of these are getting tried beforehand, and if Donald Trump wins, they're all going to sort of go away. They are extremely happy with this, but also anticipated it.
So, Jasmine, it's been nearly 3 weeks since Election Day. We have not seen or heard much from the Vice President, Kamala Harris. We know she's coming back from a few days in Hawaii. She's going to be here celebrating Thanksgiving in D.C. Yep. There has been a lot written in the last few days about her potential political future. You are one of those, though, perhaps most plugged into her orbit. What are we expecting that she'll end up doing next?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating that a lot has been written about what she's doing, but we have not heard from the vice president yet. I think she'll be addressing supporters sometime soon to thank them for all of their efforts. Of course, that at the same time as all of the questions about how her campaign spent all the money that they've raised are swirling around, and certainly maybe not she, but people close in her orbit may have to answer some of those questions. But I think the fundamental question is one, what does the vice president want to do? And I think that is what is continuously unclear. I talked to somebody at the day of her concession speech who, after she gave it, they came up to me, one of her top aides, and said, does this sound like somebody who's ready to stand down? Now, it may not have, but the question is what she wants to do going forward. And also, what do the American people want from her? The vice president, I think, in her own party is not somebody that has always been popular. Certainly, I think people have been impressed with her run for office, impressed that she was able to do more in such a short period of time than anybody else had it, or anybody else, or maybe what they thought that she could do. But I think there are a lot of questions as to what the American voter wants, particularly because we know that the reason why Donald Trump had such a decisive win is because people wanted change, particularly on the economy. And is change is the vice president somebody that can bring about change in 4 years? I think that question is still unanswered. And so I think that there are going to be a lot of questions for the vice president to answer. One thing that I have heard from advisors is that they believe that the ramp for her to answer those questions is relatively short, and that if she were to do something, she would have to do it kind of quickly.
And she's also still got to invite J.D. Vance over to see the house and everything. Like, that's the next big sort of public reconciliation moment that we haven't had yet.
Yeah, and I think the vice president is somebody who likes to do those type of rules, likes to keep those traditions. That's why one of the reasons you saw her cross the stage and go shake Donald Trump's hand when people were asking if she would at the debate, because she likes to be that kind of forward person. And so we might see that moment. Of course, there are a lot of things that the White House does, that the vice president does, to talk to people during the holiday seasons. We'll see her engage with more and more. I could see more stories coming out about things that she maybe have said to certain people. But again, the question is what is the vice president thinking? And I don't think that anyone really knows that except for her, because she keeps her cards so close to her chest.
Well, if she'd like to talk about it, she's welcome to join us here, by the way.
You can call
just
me
putting
too.
that out there. Yeah, I can call Jess. Okay, fine. There are a handful of other Trump cabinet picks that are going to face some scrutiny. We could think of Pete Hegseth, who's the defense pick, Tulsi Gabbard to serve as the director of national intelligence. RFK Jr. may face some questions, or he may also earn some bipartisan support. How is the Trump team preparing for the scrutiny that's coming for the others now?
I think it's expected. One thing I have heard is, and this is speculation internally, is perhaps Matt Gaetz stepping aside will help some of these other quote-unquote controversial picks, because some of these senators who had problems with Matt Gaetz will say, okay, well, we got the win with him, so we'll give Donald Trump a win with maybe Pete or Tulsi Gabbard. But I also have heard the argument from Donald Trump's top advisors that essentially Donald Trump won the election, so senators should get on board and agree with his mandate. This is what the American people want. And almost taunting them in a way, saying, go ahead and try to vote against these people because you guys are up for re-election, sometime, some of them, in a few years, and wait and see what happens. So I think that they're prepared for a fight.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a testing period for the Senate to see how much leeway and how much room that they will give the former president. I was talking to one person who basically said that what Donald Trump is doing is putting forth all these people who he certainly wants to see in these positions, but they're so far right that even if Congress rebukes some of them, the person that they get in after that person, like Pam Bondi, would be what they call a compromise, but is not exactly a compromise because they're still so far right, even though they're a little bit less right than the first person putting forward. Yeah. But I think that the senators will have a real test on their hands, particularly one person I think that I've heard that stuck out in my conversations with folks is Tulsi Gabbard, and how that confirmation, now that Matt Gaetz has stepped down, that confirmation is kind of next on their list of a question mark.
By the way, you called it a decisive victory. You guys know that his margin, his popular vote margin, is now under 50%, right? Should they still be calling it a mandate? if it's that close? I mean, they're less than 2
I think the
percentage
Trump
points away.
campaign believes it's a mandate, no matter how close it is, particularly if he still wins a popular vote, which I think he's on track to. I think that they believe that they have a huge runway with the American people. Now, of course, I think that's going to be highly dependent on how the economy does over the next 2 years.
You call that a mandate, 49.9 to 48.3?
You know, I think they look at it in terms of when I talked to Donald Trump's team, they won all of the swing states.
Right.
And so regardless of what these numbers ultimately end up doing, these were 7 swing states that Donald Trump was not expected to win all 7.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something also to keep in mind. And at the end of the day, is your average American voter focused on the percentage point 2 or 3 weeks out after the election? I'm not sure that they are.
No, they probably aren't. Well, call it a mandate, but don't call it a landslide, maybe.
There you go.
All right.
Yeah.
Jasmine Wright, Shelby Talcott, stop by anytime. Good to see you both.
Thank you.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All righty. Independent candidate Don Osborne lost his Senate race in Nebraska earlier this month, but now he's on a new political mission to get working-class people elected to office. This is an interesting one. We're going to talk to him next. You're streaming America Decides.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift, stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
An independent candidate who came up short in his bid to win a Senate seat in Nebraska is seeking to change the type of politician typically elected to office. You may remember Dan Osborne, recently who ran in Nebraska. He's now launched the Working Class Heroes Fund, a political action committee aimed at recruiting more blue-collar workers like himself to run for office on both sides of the aisle. This comes just weeks after Republican incumbent Deb Fischer defeated Osborne by about 7 points to retain her Senate seat in Nebraska, but not until after he gave her bit of a run for his money, her money. Dan, you know what I mean. Dan Osborne joins us now. Mr. Osborne, great to have you with us. Tell us a little bit more about this super PAC and when you decided to start it.
Yeah, it wasn't shortly after my defeat that we decided we wanted to take the momentum and keep it going. I still believe that our Congress and our governments, whether that's local or federal, should look like us. And by that, I mean, people who know what it's like to put Christmas on a credit card and punch a clock that's worked 60, 78 hours a week like I have my whole life.
Put Christmas on a credit card. That's a telling and certainly relevant one to a lot of people. You've said that your super PAC's recruitment of working class candidates is going to be nonpartisan. So what in particular are you looking for in potential candidates you'd support besides a blue-collar background?
Yeah, it's similar to my run. We brought Republicans and Democrats and independents together in my state of Nebraska. I did 180 publicly advertised events. And, we just focused on issues and not party politics. So that's what I want to be focused on. I would love to, support independents as well as Republicans, Democrats, veterans, union members, people who, again, they know what it's like and they just want to have a worker agenda and not a corporate agenda. That's what's really important to me. And you can go to workingclassheroes.fund and you can submit a candidate if you have an idea and you're watching this and you know somebody that should be running for even local dog catcher, you could put them on there.
Those are important positions. It basically sounds like you're saying if you're someone, say, who's in a union, who works paycheck to paycheck, or just doesn't espouse the sort of more traditional, either legal or corporate background that many politicians often have, that's someone you're interested in supporting and learning more about?
Correct, because that's somebody, that's kind of what I ran off of was I would be able to approach, and somebody like me would be able to approach an issue with a little bit different viewpoint than you were if you were a lawyer or a business exec, for example.
As you know, endorsements from labor unions seem to favor Vice President Harris and the Democratic Party far more than President-elect Trump and Republicans. As a former union leader, someone who's been active in organized labor for a while, can you explain this sort of growing disconnect between those official endorsements and how working class people actually ultimately vote?
Yeah, I really can't. I think rank and file union members, in my experience, which I am one of them, is just fall right in line with the demographics of where they live and their state. And they certainly, talk to each other every single day and they have their viewpoint and they observe their world based off of, their immediate surroundings. And that's all I can account for that. I'm not a political analyst by any means. I'm a mechanic. I'm focused right now on going back to work and feeding my family. That's the problem. That's I think why that's why I'm setting up this fund, because a lot of people have a problem with being able to step away from their work and then having to come back if they lose. And I'm on COBRA insurance, so those are the kinds of things I want to help people work through to help get them elected.
Yeah, just real quick, because I was reading that you have had some real-world expenses pile up since you were running, and it's a good reminder that, if people like you are going to do this, there's a real cost personally to being able to do so.
Yeah, I hate to sound like a bad country music song, but my dog almost died right after the election, and I had to fork out a pretty penny to save him, but he's doing well. But yeah, those are real life things that are unexpected that a lot of us simply can't afford, and I had to go into debt to do it.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing some of the details of this early project. Once you start to identify these candidates, come back to us and be interested to hear from them as well. Dan Osborne there in Omaha. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good Thanksgiving.
You too. Take care. President Biden participated in his final White House turkey pardoning today. What to know about the birds that have been spared from being served on Thanksgiving? We'll have that coming up. You're streaming America Decides.
can see clearly now. CBS Mornings Plus, clearly more news, more smart conversation.
More money-saving tips, more recipes.
More uplifting ways to get you on your way.
Plus, more sports, more weather.
Clearly, more CBS Mornings.
Plus,
sunshiny day.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
I have a dorky look to me. I don't look like a criminal at all.
60 Minutes has reported on fraudsters, criminals, and hoodlums. But what this minor league thief was able to do surprised even us.
These are Yogi Berra's World Series rings.
A sports story you'll have to see to believe.
Need more time with 48 Hours? Go deep behind every true crime episode with first-hand accounts from 48 Hours Investigations.
Were you at all prepared for what happened in this case?
Shock is the word that comes to mind.
Get inside the twists and turns and get in on the case. Listen to Postmortem from 48 Hours, now available wherever you get your podcasts.
I think we're very cute.
Yeah, I think we need to send out a Christmas card like this.
Yeah, let's do that.
Dollar Jill.
If you can't get into the market, it's okay. Renting is fine.
I wonder how Serena is feeling.
That's a really good question. No one's asked me that yet.
You're 70 years old? 70, yeah.
I'm 21.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
Sunday morning, the Music Man, T-Bone Burnett, plus Ted Danson and Martha Stewart with Just the Recipe. Listen for the trumpet.
I report from a lot of war zones, but I don't really take the same risks.
He's one of the bravest war correspondents 60 Minutes has ever met. But it's his relationship with his mother that you will remember. Plus, the robots making marble masterpieces in Italy.
As a kid growing up in Chicago, there was one horror movie I was too scared to watch. It was called Candyman. But did you know that the movie Candyman was partly inspired by an actual murder? Listen to Candyman, the true story behind the bathroom mirror murder, wherever you get your podcasts.
The CBS News original 60 Minutes opens its archives.
Pretty loose for Friday night.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not my first show.
With moments you haven't heard before.
It's almost more fun that way when you have something to prove.
Listen to 60 Minutes, a second look, wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you ready for some tough questions?
You're not answering my question.
This is mind-blowing.
What do you love about America?
And the question is, what is your truth?
Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard?
Let's start with easy. Who's attacking?
You might have put an innocent man behind bars.
Can you help negotiate peace?
Based on your temperament and commitment to being productive members of society, I hereby pardon Peach and Blossom.
President Biden pardoned some poultry this morning, continuing a White House tradition dating back to the late 1980s. Peach, who you see there, and Blossom hail from Minnesota, but they're named after the state flower of the president's home state of Delaware. CBS News has had an exclusive visit once again this year with the fortunate feathered fowl once they arrived here in Washington. And as they gobbled, I gabbed with John Zimmerman, the farmer who raised them, and his 9-year-old son, Grant. What's your favorite part of turkeys and raising these turkeys?
Probably when we just got to sit with them and they'd come up to us and climb on us.
How small were they when you first met them?
Like, they could fit in your hands.
Showmanship is a big part of this, so we're trying to pick out the most celebrity-like birds, or the birds that want to show off the most.
The most photogenic.
The most photogenic also. Yeah. Feathers, just general looks are very important.
Why do we pardon the turkey? Do we know what the tradition is?
The president chose to pardon the turkey. Early on, with Truman, the bird was expected to be consumed. But as time went on, I believe a couple of the earlier presidents, JFK, may have let them go to a petting zoo or whatnot, but then George Bush Sr. officially used the term pardon, and ever since then it's been a tradition. So President wants us to pardon a bird. We're not in a position to argue with that.
Oh, and they're so soft. You excited about being pardoned?
You don't go.
Can't even get an answer out of a turkey. Yes? Was that a yes? Oh, it's a yes. Okay, we'll take it. It's all right. I've had harder interviews with press secretaries. It's true. And while Peach and Blossom are certainly lucky turkeys, these birds aren't as blessed as the ones pardoned last year. You may remember they got to strut around our CBS News Washington bureau with me just hours after their pardoning ceremony. We still talk about that around here. Now, from turkeys gobbling to sleigh bells ringing, the White House is staying busy. First Lady Jill Biden welcomed the 2024 Christmas tree today at the front door, out on the North Lawn. The National Christmas Tree Association holds a contest every year to choose which farm will present their tree to the White House. This year's winner, a bit of a feel-good story. The tree is an 18-foot Fraser fir. Those are the best, and hails from North Carolina, a farm that lost 7,000 trees to Hurricane Helene. It'll be placed in the Blue Room of the White House for the remainder of the holiday season. That does it for today. We are thankful you joined us, and we'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report on November 25th, 2024. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Tonight, another victory for Donald Trump. The president-elect scores a legal win after special counsel Jack Smith files to dismiss all federal charges against him. This as Trump swiftly fills out his cabinet.